This is a 90 watt 6-port multi-USB charging block. Now the box says model Z9A. It also has a sticker that says 100 watt, but it was listed at 90 watts on the listing. I was provided this guy for free to review. If you wanted to purchase it, it would cost you somewhere between $24 with all the coupons I've seen, up to $29 or $30, depending on, when you buy it and where you buy it from. So it has kind of a standard figure 8 adapter on the back. It comes with a cable with US 120 volt outlet in there. You could buy a different cable for a different plug if you live somewhere else. And they're very hard to see on the bottom here. There are some markings, and they say AC input 100 to 240 volts, 50, 60, 1.6 amps. So it's a universal power adapter. It has USB-C outputs. It says 3 at 20 watts. So it does 5 volts at 3 amps, or 9 volts at 2.2 amps, or 12 volts at 1.67 amps. And then USB-A outputs is 10 watts, which is each, and it's 5 volts at 2 amps each. So it's not putting out a lot of power or current on any particular outlet. The advantage here is that you have 6 outlets and you can charge 6 things at once. 20 watts is perfectly good for charging a cell phone or a tablet at a pretty fast rate. It'll charge most laptops. If they're in sleep mode, it'll charge the laptops up overnight, no problem. 10 watts is okay. This is all your accessory devices, your Bluetooth headsets, maybe a small power bank, an e-reader, anything that just needs to be charged overnight, doesn't need a whole bunch of current. These 3 here are charging like your real charging. Like you can charge a USB power bank at 20 watts, you're going to charge a USB power bank overnight. So it's relatively small, relatively lightweight. The listing said it was gallium nitride, the GAN power technology. It could be. It doesn't really need to be to do max 90 amps out of something that size, but it could be. So let's test it. I'm going to test all the ports, make sure they do what they say they do individually, and then try to put it under load and see if I can get a lot of load coming out of it. All right, I plugged it in, and I see absolutely no LED lights on this. So I don't know it's been plugged in. That's actually a benefit in my situation. If I want to use this in the bedroom, I want it dark. I don't want this thing glowing all the time. So I actually think the lack of lights in here is a benefit. You might disagree, because if you're going through an airport and plugging this into an airport power outlet and you're trying to figure out does this thing actually have power or not, you'll have to have a device plugged in to figure that out. Okay, USB-C power delivery negotiated, 12.1 volts at 1.6 amps. That is 19.6 watts, so that is extremely close to the 20 watts that it claims to be able to deliver. So I'm going to say yes, that port does give the 20 watts. I'm going to try the other 2 just to make sure they all work. Right, 11.9, 1.6 amps. We have another 19 watts. So just to be sure, I'm going to try multiple devices at different voltage levels. Okay, I have my cell phone plugged in. It's charging at 9 volts. It's only taking like 8 watts. And then a bigger load is charging at 12 volts, and so it's taking the full 20 watts. So these 2 ports are working independently at different voltages. Alright, I have 3 devices charging off of my 3 USB-C ports. The laptop and the load are doing 20 watts at 12 volts, and the cell phone's doing 7 or 8 watts at 9 volts. So all 3 of these USB-C ports work together at the same time. I'm not doing a full 20 watts from all 3, but I'm doing 40, 50, say 50 watts total here. No real heat at all that I'm detecting. All right, let's switch over to the USB-A ports and try some of those guys for things. All right, I'm testing the USB-A outlets. one USB-A outlet, I have this load set to 3.2 amps, and so it's sagged slightly to 4.92, but it's doing 16 watts of power out of this guy. Supposedly you can only do 10 watts out of each. I suspect that what they've done is they have 30 watts of power at 5 volts across all three of these guys. So I think it's sharing, you know, the 2 amps, 2 amps, 2 amps. I think it's probably just 6 amps for all three of them. And if you had a device that would draw 6 amps at 5 volts, it would work with one of them. Okay, I have my cell phone plugged in. It's charging at 5 volts, 1.3 amps, so it's taking about 6.7 watts. This load here I'm going to turn on. That is a 3 amp load. So this guy is taking 3.2 amps. The voltage is sagged down to 4.9 volts. This guy here is down to half a watt. I'm not sure why that guy went down quite so much. It might be detecting the overload here. Let me drop this down to 2 amps. Alright, I've dropped this load to 2 amps, which is its rated specification. It's at 5 volts, 2 amps, and now my other port is doing 5 volts, 1.2 amps as well. So it looks like you can draw 3 amps from one of the ports, but if you do that, it causes some of the other ports to derate and stop drawing power. So right now, we have 2 ports delivering almost 10 watts and almost 7 watts here. Now I'm running out of devices I can plug into this guy. Let me go see if I can find some other USB-A thing to plug in. Okay, I have 3 different loads plugged into the 3 different USB-A outlets. My phone's at 95% charged. It's drawing like 2.5 watts, so it's not drawing a whole bunch. This tablet's 92% charged. It's drawing 0.78 amps, so it's not drawing a whole bunch. My USB load here I can program to do exactly 2 amps, and so this guy here is drawing exactly 10 watts right now. Well, just drop down for me. 10 watts. So we got 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. We're doing about 18 of the 30 watt supposed power from these 3 outlets, and the voltage level 4.98 there, 4.84 here, 5.13, no, sorry, 4.79 there. So the voltages are about the same. It might be that my 3 different meters are just slightly off on all their voltages, or it might be that each port has its own provider and their voltages are just slightly different. But I am able to draw power out of all 3 USB-A ports at the same time. Let me go ahead and plug in something to a USB-C port just to make sure that's not going to mess things up, although I suspect it won't. Alright, so I'm charging my laptop, I presume at about 20 watts, and all of these devices seem to be charging still. So I haven't loaded down every single port with the full wattage from every single port, but I'm pretty confident that this guy can deliver most of the power it's rated as. Each individual port meets its specification. I've drawn 20 watts from top 2 ports and another 10 watts from the bottom one on the USB-C, and that all worked. I've drawn 2 amps from 1 or 2 of these ports, and then, you know, a half amp or an amp on some of the others, and they're all working together. So if you're looking to charge 6 different devices all at once, this is a pretty reasonable way to do this. So you're looking kind of an overnight charger. You plug all your devices in at a docking station or whatever, and they are all charged when you get up in the morning. Alright, I'm drawing 20 watts out of USB-C to that load, 12 watts out of USB-C to that load, so that is 32 watts coming out of the USB-C side, out of the maximum of 60. And then on the USB-A side, I have this load set to 3 amps, so it's drawing 15 watts out of the maximum of 30 on the USB-A side. So this thing's loaded at 50%. I'm going to leave it for an hour, come back and check the heat and see how it's doing. Okay, this guy has been out here for about an hour and 10 minutes, and there's the hot spot. It is about 50 some degrees, centigrade, 51 centigrade, say. So there's a spot that's 60 degrees centigrade. So that is definitely warm to the touch. It's uncomfortably warm. I wouldn't want to keep my hand on that for very long. So if you draw about 50 watts out of this thing, let's see, 20, 30, 47, I think we're doing about 40 some watts out of this thing, continuously for an hour plus, it will get uncomfortably hot. So I don't recommend loading this down at 90 watts continuously, at least not with anything nearby and around it. You know, it's not unsafe hot, but you certainly wouldn't want to leave it touching a body part, for example. But it is a reasonable amount of hot for the amount of power that's been going through it